Hello, welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about speciation and adaptation. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. We are down to the last two lessons for this subunit. So, like what I've mentioned, we will be talking about speciation, adaptation, and of course, a little bit about endangered and extinct species. So these are the specific lessons for this video. We will look into geographic isolation, reduction of gene flow, convergent and divergent evolution, adaptivization, and some adaptations of plants and animals, and some endangered and extinct species. So these are the lessons for this video. We will talk about geographic isolation, reduction of gene flow, convergent and divergent evolution, and adaptive radiation. We'll also look into adaptations of plants and animals and a little bit information about endangered and extinct species. In biology, a species is one of the basic units of biological classification and it is considered a taxonomic rank. Again, it is always written with letter S and pronounced as in plural form, species, even if you're just talking to one group of organisms. Um, a species is often defined as the largest group of organisms in which two individuals are capable of reproducing and creating fertile offspring. Okay, so usually through sexual reproduction. So a species is a group of organisms that they share so much similar characteristics that they can have a fertile offspring. They can mate, they can breed, and produce fertile offspring. So if they cannot do that, if those two individuals cannot reproduce or and produce a fertile offspring, then we can say that they belong to two different species. So speciation is how a new kind of plant or animal species is created. So this is mostly the product of evolution, if you will. Okay. So after all those mechanisms of evolution that we've tackled, the end product for that will be the creation of new species. So we call that speciation. This occurs when a group within a species separates from other members of its species and develop its own unique characteristics. And this one we've tackled in depth in the previous video. Okay, specific mechanisms, specifically natural selection, genetic drift, mutation, and gene flow are all the ways by which this could occur. Are all the possible ways by which speciation could occur in living organisms. To learn more how mechanisms of evolution can become driving forces of speciation, I recommend that you watch these two videos from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The first one is Natural Selection and Sexual Selection, an illustrated introduction. I'll provide the link in the description below. And this one, Speciation, an illustrated introduction. Again, links in the description below. If you're also interested, you can visit this Understanding Evolution from berkeley.edu. Okay, I'll provide the link in the description below. Okay, so the key to speciation is the evolution of genetic differences between the incipient or initial species. Okay, if you still remember our discussion about natural selection, there will always be variation within a species, within a population. There will always be differences either in traits, phenotypes, genotypes of organisms in one population. Now, that's a very important requirement because those genetic differences will eventually lead to speciation. So, for a lineage to split once and for all, the two incipient or initial species must have genetic differences that are expressed that will eventually cause them not to have a successful mating or breeding activities. Okay, so the mating between them will either not happen or not be successful. So, this need not to be huge genetic differences, even a small change in timing, okay, location, rituals of mating could be enough to cause the lineage to split or to diverge from each other. So this is called reproductive isolating mechanisms. Okay, if you ever plan to pursue biology in the future, you will definitely have this course on evolution, and you will study about prezygotic and postzygotic reproductive isolating mechanisms. Okay, but for now, we will just have an overview about these isolating mechanisms. Okay, so again, it's not required to have a huge genetic difference. Even a small change in timing, okay, during when, for example, if one group mates in the morning and then the other group only mates in the afternoon, that difference in timing is enough to eventually lead to evolution and speciation. Location, if one prefers, if one, for example, one type of bird prefers to mate on the top branches of the tree of a tree, while the other one prefers near the ground. So that difference is enough to lead them to diverge from each other, or even rituals or dance or song. Differences in their songs are enough to trigger this speciation. But still, some differences is necessary. This change might evolve by natural selection or genetic drift, and we've all discussed this thoroughly in the previous video. To thoroughly discuss speciation and also a little bit about prezygotic and postzygotic reproductive isolating mechanisms, I require that you watch this video from Amoeba Sisters entitled Speciation. I'll provide the link in the description below. These two videos also that talks about reproductive isolating mechanisms. This one is from the perspective of animal genitalia. Okay, this is from TED-Ed entitled The Evolution of Animal Genitalia. Very good video to watch. I'll provide the link in the description below. And reproductive isolation and speciation in lizards from Biointeractive. Again, very good video. I'll provide the links in the description below. Now let's look at causes of speciation. The first one would be geographic isolation. So here, very easy. Isolation, they are separated from each other geographically. Okay, it's the physical environment that separates them. So for example, if this is your original population of fruit fly, okay, if this happens to be their original population and for some reason they were separated either by a river or there's an event, for example, in genetic drift, a catastrophic event or a fire, or they just happen to be swept on different parts of the island, then those organisms in these smaller groups are the ones that will contribute to the gene pool of that new group of population. Okay, so whatever the genes that they are carrying will be the ones to pass on to their offspring. So whatever varieties or variation that they have, that will be selected and carried on to the next generation. And if so happens that those differences start to change the traits, phenotypes, and phenotypes or the physical characteristic of the organism, sooner or later that could lead them to evolve to become two different species. So in this case, for example, one of the ancestors here could have a trait for green coloration, okay, of this fruit fly. Then eventually, that trait will be passed on to the future descendants, and eventually that could lead to most of them having the green trait, while this one mostly light brown trait. Then eventually that will be passed on to their offspring. Now, how do we know that speciation has occurred? If the differences are so big that even if they meet each other, these two groups, they no longer mate or breed, or even if they can mate and they can breed, they cannot produce a fertile offspring, meaning that their offspring are sterile or infertile. So that does not. So it means that they have already um, diverge from each other, and they are now considered two new species, okay, of the original population. So it like what the text mentioned, it does not have to be a physical barrier like a river, something that will just separate them from each other. That's something that will just prevent them from mating each other, either a wall, a human-made wall, or a dam, okay, or a subdivision was built in the middle of the forest, for example, or in the middle of the mountain, or whatever, something that physically separates them and prevents them from mating. We call that geographic isolation. The next cause of speciation is reduction of gene flow. So if you still remember, gene flow is one of the mechanisms of evolution. Okay, so that happens when a group, a member of an existing population migrates or proceeds to occupy a new land or a new habitat. So they bring with them their genes, they bring with them their traits, and then they intermix that with whatever existing organisms are present there if they happen to belong to the same species. Now here, the reduction of that process can actually hasten or is actually sufficient to trigger or to cause speciation. How does that happen? So imagine if this is the original population, original species, and they live in this area. If, for example, if this square represents their habitat, so it's easy to assume that those who are living closer to each other will have higher chances of mating. Okay, so for example, if this beetle is or this fly is living closer to this fly, they have almost 80% chances of mating and producing an offspring. If this fly versus this fly, they have 50 chances of mating, and the farther they are from each other, they have lesser chances of mating. Okay. So over successive generations, those who mate closely with each other tend to have that similar traits or variation within the species. Okay, and those who are closer to each other, they are the ones who tend to mate with each other. Eventually, if this happens over many generations, it could create daughter species. Okay, these are new species with hybrids. Okay, or with variations within the species. So this is actually enough that could cause speciation for this group in the future. Now note that the difference in their genetic frequencies or the difference in their traits could actually the difference could grow too big that there might come a time that these two groups can no longer interbreed or can no longer produce a fertile offspring. So that will eventually lead to speciation. So how can we visualize this, for example, in humans? So there's a reason why, people in the same country mostly look similar with each other compared to those from other countries, because we have higher chances of mating with people within our own country. So, for example, if you're living here in Alabang, then you have almost 80% chances of finding someone within Alabang. Okay, that's just a classic example. And you have 50% chance of finding a mate, for example, in Tuguegarao, so it's quite far from you. 20% chance of finding a mate from, for example, from Mindanao, and almost 0% chance of finding someone from Alaska. So even if you belong to the same species, we're all humans, and this is the habitat that we occupy. We are quite far from each other, so we have smaller chances of mating with someone from Alaska, and we have higher chances of mating with someone who's from Alabang, for example. Now, so if we keep on mating with someone from Alabang, or we keep on mating from someone in the Philippines and all that, eventually, our group will form a specific and very distinct genetic composition and physical trait. Okay, that's why Filipinos will look different from someone from the Middle East, and we look different from Europe and all that, because we tend to reproduce with or mate with those who are closer to us. We have higher chances of mating with those who are closer to us than those who are farther apart. However, we still have gene flow. People still migrate, people still go to other places, people still find their mate in different locations of the globe. So it's still possible to have genetic recombination. And we've seen that all over the globe, okay? So it's still possible. So if there's a reduction of gene flow, that can cause speciation. If there's gene flow, that can cause genetic recombination and can also trigger new combination in the traits of the organisms. Now, how do we see the results of speciation? Okay, so we have several evidence that supports speciation. The first one is convergent evolution. So this is the converge, okay, to come together, okay, converge, to meet at one point. So this is a process wherein animals or organisms from different groups, okay, evolve similar characteristics because those are the adaptations needed to survive in their environment. So birds, okay, eastern bluebird birds, they are a different group from dinosaurs, although they have a similar they could share a similar ancestor, but they're quite a different group. And this pterosaur is a different species or different group than Samoan flying fox. But if you notice, they all evolved to have adaptations for flying, right? So even if they belong to different species, they can actually evolve or come together. They can actually show convergent evolution based on their need and based on their adaptations to survive better in their environment, okay? So here, three different vertebrates lightened their bones and transformed their hands to become wings. And you have the flaps here to help them fly. So these are examples of convergent evolution. Okay, so one group here are placental mammals. So you're familiar with them. They are attached during conception and during pregnancy, while they're growing inside their mother's wombs, they have a placenta that attaches them to their mother, and that's how they were nourished while growing in the uterus. So those are your placental mammals. However, we also have marsupials, okay? So these organisms are born very, very small, and they grow inside their mother's pouches, okay, or similar structures. Now, even if even if they have different ancestors because of them, this group being placentals and this group being marsupials, these some of them still evolve to have similar characteristics. For example, you have a borrower placental mammal in the form of a mole, and you also have a marsupial mole. So they are different groups, placental and marsupial, but they have borrower adaptations. Same with a climber adaptations. Okay, if that's the niche that they have occupied in the ecosystem. So a lemur here, a placental lemur, and then a spotted cuscus. Okay, a cat, a placental cat, okay, an ocelot, and a Tasmanian tiger, which is also a marsupial organism. So even if they have differences, they have different ancestors, they were driven by adaptation and by speciation and by evolution to evolve with similar characteristics to become better suited to their niche, okay, or to the role that they play in their ecosystem. So they converge, they meet at this point, they tend to look the same even if they come from different ancestors. Another result of speciation is divergent evolution. So if convergent, different groups meet together and share similar characteristics, this is the opposite. Okay, this is the process by which two or more species diverge from their common ancestor. Okay, they evolved away or they diversified away from their ancestors. So over time, as two different species continues to evolve, they become less and less similar from their ancestor, and this leads to adaptive radiation. So this one is a cladogram of representative vertebrates. Okay, so all of these organisms, lamprey, shark, salamander, lizard, tiger, gorilla, and humans, we all share a common ancestor at this point in the evolutionary tree, in the phylogenetic tree. However, due to adaptation, due to their need to survive in their environment, some traits evolved in these organisms, and those traits were enough to cause divergent evolution among those organisms. So, for example, the trait for jaws happened to evolve, and then those who did not have jaws, they become one group, and those who have jaws continue to evolve. Then those with amniotic membrane, okay, continue to evolve in this way, and then those who did not, okay, they went in this way. That's why you have your salamanders and amphibians. Those with tails evolved in this way in the groups of primates, gorillas, and humans, and those mammals who still have tails, they evolved in this way. So they diverged, they moved away from each other in order to adapt to their environment and to survive in those environments. Okay, again, if you're interested about this is studied under taxonomy, and you can check out the PDF on biological diversity, which tackles more about this. Another result of speciation is seen in adaptive radiation. Okay, so it is a process by which organisms diversify rapidly from an ancestral species. When a change in the environment makes new resources available, creates new challenges, or opens new environmental niches. Okay, so this one was mostly seen in the Galapagos finches. Okay, that was the one observed by Charles Darwin during his voyage in aboard HMS Beagle. So he was able to see that in every island, okay, there's a representative finch there, but they tend to have different structural structures of their beaks based on the food that they eat. Okay, so the vegetarian tree finch have this type of beak, grasping beaks for those who eat insects, probing beaks for woodpecker finch and cactus ground finch, sharp beak ground finch. Okay, so crushing beaks are shown by those ground finches. Okay, this one also yon adaptive radiation in Galapagos finches. So those who eat mainly insects, they share similarities with their beaks, and they vary per island, okay, of the Galapagos. Those who mostly eat buds and fruits, they have this structure. Those who mostly eat seeds, they have this similar structures. So the type of their beaks is determined by the diet that this insect have, that these birds have in their environment. This one is also seen by mammals. Okay, so they radiate from their ancestor into different smaller species, smaller groups to become better suited to their environment. So same with mammals. Okay, so all mammals share a common ancestor, an insectivore, a small insectivore. That was our ancestor, but due to the pressures of the environment, from that small insectivore, we had our primates here, our squirrel group here. Some evolved to become carnivores, some evolved to become aquatic cetaceans, some evolved to be elephants, and some evolved to have scales like pangolin and all that. So our ancestors, millions of years ago, hundreds and millions of years ago, due to pressures of the environment, underwent adaptive radiation just so that they could just so they could become better fitted to survive in their new environment. So this one shows adaptive radiation in Hawaiian plants. Okay, so they descended from a tarweed from North America. Imagine 5 million years ago. So from their ancestor, you have these different forms of Hawaiian plants. Okay, based on their surrounding. Okay, so for different island, there's a different form or different evolution of that ancestral tarweed. Okay, because that's what's needed in their ecological niche in their environment to survive. Okay, so the pressure to adapt was enough to cause speciation among those plants. Adaptive radiation is also shown by cichlid fishes in the Great Lakes of East Africa. So this is their adaptation to have a second set of jaws for better chewing and grinding of the food that they eat. However, based on the food that they eat, they diverge from each other. They adapted away from each other to become better suited to their environment. So this is the adaptation and evolution of the fish eaters, snail eaters, algae scrapers, zooplankton eaters, leaf eaters, and insect eaters. So they had adaptive radiation to become better suited to their environment. This one is also shown by marsupials in Australia. So if you remember, Australian marsupials mostly share a common ancestor. So they all have a common ancestor, but they evolved away from each other, and they shared similar characteristics with placentals, because this is what's needed to survive in their ecological niches. Okay, so even if they are marsupials, over time they evolved to have similar characteristics with placentals. So the reason why most mammals in Australia are marsupials is because they have an ancestral marsupial. Okay, so they evolved from one ancestor to become a marsupial kangaroo, marsupial mole, marsupial anteater, marsupial flying phalanger, marsupial mammals, okay, to become better adapted to their environment. Okay, so divergent evolution, in which several or many species evolve from one ancestor, filling available niches. Okay, so all the marsupial mammals in Australia are examples of adaptive radiation. Now, if all those processes that we've discussed occurred in nature or occurred naturally over time, usually it will not really cause that much of a problem. However, sometimes when events happen due to human intervention or human activities, that could cause some concerns and some issues with organisms' ability to find their suitable mate. Okay, for example, here, um, this one is a Puerto Rican parrot, okay? And they were bred in captivity, okay? So they were bred in captivity. They were bred away from their original population, and they happened to develop a different dialect or a different type of song or bird communication. So that's quite problematic, because what could happen if they were reintroduced into the original population? Will their fellow Puerto Rican parrots recognize them? Will their fellow Gabi birds recognize them and mate with them? Because if not, then if there's differences in their songs or their communication is so great that they can now be considered a daughter species or a new hybrid. Now that could be problematic for them, because no one will reproduce with them anymore, and they were bound to stay in captivity, because those are the only ones who recognize them and could mate with them. So captive breeding could save them from extinction, but could change the way that these birds communicate with each other. So that's quite a bit problematic uh, concern. So we've mentioned the term adaptation, or to become better adapted to their environment, over and over. So at this point, let's clarify what adaptations mean. So adaptation or adaptive trait um, is a trait with a current functional role in the life of our organism that is maintained and evolved by means of natural selection. So it means that this adaptation is continuously selected by nature, therefore it continuously is inherited and is continually shown by the population. Okay? So organisms face a succession of environmental challenges as they grow and develop, and they're equipped with adaptive flexibility in response to those conditions. So adaptations refer to the both current state of being adapted and to the dynamic evolutionary process that leads to adaptation. Now, one important thing that we have to understand about adaptations is that they enhance the fitness, okay, to be fit to fit to survive. Okay, they enhance the fitness and survival of individuals um, within a population, and if those adaptive traits are repeatedly inherited, that can also lead to evolution of that particular group. Now let's look at some examples of adaptations of organisms. Okay, so these are the adaptations of a polar bear. So most bears eat some plant matter, but where polar bears live, okay, in the cold regions, there is almost no plant. So they have adapted to have a carnivorous lifestyle. Okay, so instead of being plant eaters, they have adapted to consume meat. Okay, to consume meat as part of their diet. They have a very thick blubber which helps them keep warm. Their white fur is an obvious adaptation to the polar bear's life in the Arctic. It helps them hide from in plain sight. Okay, so because the Arctic is covered with snow, so they evolved to have white fur so that they could hide better. okay, especially though they're young. Their big furry feet help them walk in the snow. So how about this owl? Okay, so owls are they have totally silent flight from fringe flight feathers that muffle the sound of air passing through their feathers. Okay, so actually there's a video in a documentary in which the scientists try to determine how much noise an owl make when it hunts. It's almost 0 decibel, almost no noise was created when they fly. Okay, that allows them to become better predators. They have large eyes set forward in the head to give great depth perception for hunting. Their necks have a lot of flexibility. They can turn it almost 360 um, for following their prey as they move, and they have sharp talons for catching their prey um, on the fly. So these are more videos of interesting adaptations in other organisms. So these are plant evolution and adaptations from NBC. Kindly watch this video, very interesting. I'll provide the link in the description below. And this is from TED-Ed, Amazing Ways That Plants Defend Themselves. Again, linked in the description below. This one also, adaptations in animals. Okay, I'll provide the link. And this is from BBC Earth, top 5 most fascinating animal adaptations. Again, linked in the description below. Now, this one is from National Geographic. This is their playlist on weird animal adaptations. For example, frog spits out young, hooded seals, kings of camouflage, okay, and the rest. Okay, so I recommend that you visit this playlist, and you can find the link in the description below. Even humans, okay, also have shown adaptations. So how this video from SciShow, how people have evolved to live in the clouds. So very interesting video. So linked in the description below, and how humans evolved to become the best runners. Again, linked in the description below. Now, sometimes organisms fail to adapt to their environment. That could cause their numbers to be endangered. And if they really cannot fully recover, that will cause them to become extinct. So, an endangered species is a species which has been categorized by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, as likely to become extinct. And this is the second most severe conservation status for wild populations. So, for sure you've heard about endangered species and extinct species. Many nations have laws that protect conservation-reliant species. For example, forbidding hunting, restricting land development, or creating preserves or sanctuaries for those organisms. Population numbers, trends, and species conservation status can be found in the list of organisms by population. So these are some videos, okay? This one is from National Geographic. Some of the world's most endangered animals. And here it shows us from Vice News, botanists that are scaling the cliffs just to save endangered plants. I'll provide the links in the description below. This one is from WWF, World Wildlife Fund. This is their species directory. So you can actually check the conservation status of these organisms if they are endangered, critically endangered, or near extinction. Okay, you can check out this website. I'll provide the link in the description below. This one is from IUCN, their red list of threatened species. You can actually look into those entries and see their red list. Okay, linked in the description below. So in biology, extinction is the end of an organism or a group of organisms, normally a species. So we can say that extinction has occurred if it is the death of the last individual of the species. Okay? So for example, if there's three organisms, two females, one male. If the male died, so there's only two females left, then it's actually safe to conclude that they are now considered as an extinct species because nobody will reproduce with the two females anymore. So even if there's two females left, it's most likely that they will become extinct. So if there's no more mating pair within that species, so they're most likely considered extinct. Only recently have extinctions become recorded, and scientists have become alarmed at the current high rate of extinctions. Okay, so with our abilities to actually track down all the endangered organisms, we've seen a high trend of organisms becoming extinct. Most species that become extinct are never scientifically documented, and they estimate that up to half of the present existing plant and animal may be extinct by 2100. So in the past, the Earth has experienced 5 mass extinctions. Okay, when we say mass extinctions, massive. There are a large number of species that went extinct. Okay, so these are the 5 mass extinctions. The Cretaceous extinction around 65 million years ago, the Triassic, Permian, Devonian, and Ordovician. And right now we are experiencing the 6th mass extinction. Now, we call that the contemporary mass extinction. Now, in the past, this extinction are mostly caused by change in climate, by the drastic change on Earth's um, atmosphere, or being struck by asteroid or comets or volcanic eruptions, or change in the oxygen content of the environment. Huge catastrophic events. But for the first time ever, we are facing a mass extinction caused by human activities. Okay, the mass extinction that our planet is experiencing right now are caused by human actions, such as hunting or illegal logging or destruction of their natural habitats. To learn more, I recommend that you visit this endangeredspeciesinternational.org that talks about the 5 mass extinctions and what the 6th mass extinction that we're experiencing right now. I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, organisms are not only being killed because of natural catastrophes or habitat destructions. Sometimes they're just being killed for the sake of fashion. Okay, and that this is something I'm very concerned about. Okay, um, organisms such as alligators and snakes and other rare species are being killed just for their skin to be made into bags and wallets, or straps of watches or belts. And that's something that makes me it makes me so uncomfortable, and it infuriates me so much that we have this um, industry that caters to this luxurious items. So if you're interested, this video from how it's made shows us how alligator bags are created. And this one, quite graphic. No, this is actually a PETA US investigation that shows us how reptiles are killed for their skin just to be made into bags and belts, like what I've mentioned. So this one is quite graphic. So if you have concerns with seeing blood or seeing animals being killed, I recommend that you refrain from watching this video. But if you have the stomach for it, and if you're interested, you could watch this one. I'll provide the links in the description below. Now, these are lists of animals already considered extinct. You can check this out. I'll provide the link in the description below. And plants that are already extinct. Again, links in the description below. Now, one major cause of plant and animal extinction, and even other organisms, would be climate change, and not all of them are better suited and better adapted to survive climate change. So, to learn more about it, I recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed. Can wildlife adapt to climate change? I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, for your reflective journal logs, I recommend that you watch this video from Stated Clearly. Does the theory of evolution really matter? Linked in the description below. And this one, Why Are You Alive? Life, Energy, and ATP from Kyrgyzstan. This will mostly summarize everything that we've tackled, especially since introduction to life science, reproduction, bioenergetics, interaction and interdependence, and even evolution. Okay, so I hope you'll find it very interesting and you can able to reflect thoroughly about this video, and I'll provide the link in the description below. That ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.